Hi, I'm Rich Miller. At Virtua, we believe citizens need to be informed about the important healthcare issues affecting their lives. That's why we're proud to support healthcare programming produced by the Caucus Educational Corporation and their partners in public television.
Early childhood education, a smart investment. Next on Caucus, New Jersey.
Funding for this edition of Caucus, New Jersey has been provided by the PNC Foundation, which supports early childhood education through Grow Up Great, a multi-year initiative to help prepare children from birth to age 5 for success in school and life. The New Jersey Education Association, Felician College, Virtua, MagnaCare, the Russell Berry Foundation, and by Steve and Elaine Pozicki. Promotional support provided by the New Jersey Business and Industry Association and by New Jersey Monthly, the magazine of the Garden State, available at newsstands.
Welcome to Caucus, New Jersey. I'm Steve Adubato. Excellent early childhood education can lead to academic success later in life. But what exactly are the benefits to children and the rest of society? Here in the studio to discuss the importance of early childhood education are Daniel Hart, a professor of childhood studies and psychology at the great Rutgers, the State University. I'm only saying that because I graduated from there. Linda Bowden is the regional president for PNC Bank of New Jersey. Ellen Wallach is the director of the Division of Early Childhood Education at the Department of Education in the state of New Jersey. And Carlos Medina, chairman of the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in New Jersey. I want to thank all of you for joining us.
Hey, Steve. Good morning.
One important discussion. Linda, we've talked about early childhood education for a long time at PNC. It matters a lot. How important is this subject?
Oh, it's critical. I think it's critical on a number of different levels. It's not just the altruistic approach that people are taking in terms of getting out there and trying to help children. There are so many studies that show it makes a huge difference if there's early intervention, but there's also a very strong business imperative. If we do this right, if we are truly able to make a difference in these children's lives in terms of their readiness for education, giving them a head start, this will impact us economically in the years to come.
Real quick, Grow Up Great is?
Grow Up Great.
By the way, those who watch PBS every morning know what Grow Up Great is, but go ahead.
Grow Up Great is our PNC Foundation, and it's really our effort at putting a stake in the ground around children 5 and under to ensure that they do have a head start, that they do grow up great.
Linda had a great point. She said, if we do this right. You question if we're doing it right?
Well, I think we can do a lot better. Linda's right that there's a lot of evidence to indicate that early childhood education on the whole is effective. But there are exceptions where we clearly want to improve. So, for example, the National Impact Study on Head Start found that there were no persistent
Take a step back. I want to assume everyone knows what Head Start is, but they don't. What is Head Start? And then you can talk about the research.
Okay, so Head Start is the long-running federal program that
1964 started?
Around there.
Right, Lyndon Johnson, part of the Great Society program?
That's right. That provides early childhood education to children who are at risk largely because of income, and doesn't serve all of them, but these programs have been in existence across the country for a long time. The most recent evaluation that the government, the federal government completed, I don't know, about 2 years ago, suggested that the long-run benefits of Head Start were very difficult to discern. Doesn't mean that early childhood education is a failure. It just means that we have to do a better job, and there are avenues that we can pursue to improve it.
So so you know, there's a lot of research on this. You're talking about Head Start, but what are the best practices? What are the attributes of a great early childhood education program? In full disclosure, my dad and my family have been involved in early childhood education for a long time with preschool programs. We talked a little bit about that. You know a little bit about those programs, and I want to believe most of them work pretty well. What are the best practices?
So the best practices are a prepared teacher who knows how to support young children's development.
Specializing in the area.
Specializing in the area.
Not just a teacher who says, oh, I think I can get a job there. They have to be certified in the area.
Right, so they should have a preschool to third grade certificate. Also,
that's one thing.
Right, that's one thing. The next ingredient is a developmentally appropriate curriculum. What
does that mean?
It means that there's a scope and sequence that covers all domains of development that dictates what the teacher does from day to day. The third ingredient is a small class size.
How small?
So, well, in our program, it's 15 kids in a class.
15?
15.
So,
with a
devil's
certified
advocate.
Teacher and a teacher assistant.
Okay, certified teacher and a teacher's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
You have 28 kids in a class, and you have a teacher who is certified. That teacher has no backup. Is that cause for concern for a parent?
Yeah.
Why?
Because there's no possible way that the teacher can support each individual child. And that's the key to a good program, is that the teacher has the chance to support every individual child.
But do economics drive a lot of this? I mean, do economics drive the ability to do what you just described? With all the
Sure.
cutbacks on the public side, with private, initiatives, be they nonprofit or otherwise, saying, hey, listen, we'd love to be able to have what you just described, and other great enrichment initiatives, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's no better investment than a high quality preschool program. So you have to invest
long
in it.
term.
Right.
But say you're trying to make your budget, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, and you say, listen, I'd love to do that, but the economics don't support it right now. And you're saying, yeah, but that child's not getting the best early childhood education experience, Linda.
But this is
I'll bring
why
in Carlos.
this is why you need a strong partnership between the private sector and the public sector.
What does that
because,
mean?
well, from a public perspective, certainly our state has some budget challenges. That's no secret, and it's difficult to find the discretionary funding to pump up this program that we're all saying is so critical. So you've got to find ways to partner with the private sector, and PNC is an example. I know there are many others out there, and I think part of that and part of our Grow Up Great program is an advocacy approach. We have to advocate for these types of programs. We've got to advocate in terms of how important this is for children. And you can't, it's not going to just be privately funded. It's not going to be publicly funded. We've got to do a better job of marrying the two.
Carlos, talk about the role of the chamber in this.
Well, especially in the Hispanic business community, these children have possibly dual language. English might be the second language for them. So it's extremely important to have them prepared so they're better citizens, they're better entrepreneurs. So I agree with Linda, it's very important that we get this, going, but they have private-public partnerships, because it's going to only raise the economy if you have these partnerships. So corporations such as PNC are doing the right thing. They're helping in an area that's really, the state just doesn't have the money to do it right now.
But let me ask you, but PNC's a company. Is there a groundswell within the corporate community, within the respective chambers, to say, this is our role as well? We need to take a very active role in supporting early childhood education, and we need to help make this investment. Government can't do it alone. Public dollars are not going to get this done. Do you feel it? Is there a groundswell?
I think there isn't yet.
There is not?
There is not, no.
Because the message hasn't gotten across that there's a direct correlation between what we do or don't do, the level of the investment we make or we don't make in early childhood education, and what on the other end? What's on the other end, Linda?
If we don't make the investment, you have people who will grow from children into adults who are not as well educated as they can be, therefore don't necessarily value education, therefore don't get the training to fill the jobs that are out there, and it's a cycle that will continue to repeat itself. And I'll tell you something, Steve, just to give you an example of the tremendous need. We're about to launch a vocabulary initiative within our early childhood program, and studies have shown that children from low-income areas come to school having heard 30 million fewer words. Now, obviously, some of those words are repeats.
Back up. Put that in perspective.
the genesis of this is, in lower income areas, there's not as much conversation with children. So if they're not engaged in some of the programs that were being discussed a little bit earlier, that Ellen and Dan were talking about, they're not exposed to language as much. And so there are some studies, if you quantify it, that have said that children are exposed to 30 million fewer words when they come to school. Now, 30 million fewer words, meaning certainly there's repeats in those words, but I think that's a way to sort of put a very fine point on it and really drive home the whole notion that these kids are not coming prepared when their brains are the most fertile.
And when they don't have those words, what does that mean?
Their language, their brains, when the children are young, are very, very fertile, very receptive to language. That window starts to close as they get older. And so if they don't have those words, they come to school with less readiness and less ability to learn. And I turn to my colleagues who are experts in the field.
The White House just released a report in January that suggested that the achievement gap between children from upper income families and lower income families, that gap that we all know exists is largely established before age 5. After age 5, it's relatively stable. Schools aren't diminishing it, but they're not increasing it either. It's there when they arrive, which is why there is this imperative to try to provide the kind of context that allows kids to catch up.
The gap that exists between, I mean, it's such a cliche, the haves and the have-nots, but those who are more comfortable financially and those who are struggling financially. The gap is greatest among children 0 to 5.
That's right. So what begins to happen at birth, they're fairly close together.
Yep.
And then over the first 5 years, it grows.
Yep.
After age 5, it's relatively stable.
So I'm thinking about, I personalize hopefully when it's relevant. Our daughter Olivia's, she'll tell you now, she's 4.5. She knows exactly what her half birthday was, which I was struck by, because there were presents involved in her mind. I am struck by the words that she knows. I don't even know where she got those words. And her ability to use those words in a sentence pretty close to the way those words should be used is striking to me. And I know that comes from the fact, shout out to the Montclair Pre-K, a great program. So I ask myself, if I see it in our daughter, and I see it in many other children in our community, a pretty comfortable community, why is it not mandatory that early childhood education is mandatory? I mean, why are we just not saying, okay, if we know that that's where the greatest period of time that the gap exists, that's where the greatest problem is, and then after it kind of stabilizes, how do we not then just say, then every kid has to go to a quality early childhood program?
I think it's because issues of funding and sustainability prevent it from happening. We would love to be able to do it.
But no, would we love to be able to do it? Respectfully, those issues of funding are also a question of priorities. The decisions we make, and I'm not going to make a speech here because on PBS it's not the job of the host to do that, but is it not a fact that the budgetary decisions we make are a question of how we prioritize what's most important to us? So if we say we'd love to be able to do it, but we don't do it, the question is, it's not that important.
I agree with
because
you, though.
it's just not that important. Carlos, am I wrong about that?
I think you're right. I think the information's not out there, and chambers and organizations like PNC just have to keep disseminating that information.
And I do want to say we're focused, of course, right now, and appropriately so, on structured programs for children. But I want to make certain we don't lose sight of the home life as well. Steve,
What do you mean?
Well, I've met your Olivia, and she's a very bright and precocious young child. And she's in a home where words are used a lot. And so she's exposed to that a lot. And so I think part of what we're talking about is sort of an obligation to ensure that it's not just the only objective of getting those kids in a structured program, again, very important, but if we can also get to the parents and make certain that they understand how important it is to speak to their children, to sing to their children, to read to their children. Reading's a big, big part of this.
I agree, but Linda makes a great point. And it strikes me that the research also shows, and if I'm wrong, you'll help me on this, Dan, aren't there parents, as Linda says, get them more involved, get them reading, aren't there parents out there who are watching right now who are convinced that early childhood education isn't all that important for their child? Mm-hmm. And if, in fact, that's a fact, are they the ones that are disproportionately reading to their children, doing the things that are filling in the gaps that would otherwise be taking place in an early childhood program? Or is it not happening there, which makes it even worse?
Well, I think the research tends to show that there's an advantage for early childhood education for exactly the kids who are not getting that kind of experience at home. Mm-hmm. Sure, I mean, we all know that there are kids who can learn well at home without schools because their parents are engaged and reading to them. And
are they the ones who tend to not be sending their children to an early childhood program?
No, they oftentimes because they do too because they're engaged parents. They want to provide every opportunity.
So who's not getting to go?
Oftentimes it's the kinds of kids who don't have parents who can find their way to either for language issues sometimes because they don't know how to access the resources, don't find the way to connect their kids up to early childhood education programs. And so every year there's this issue in many of the districts in New Jersey to try and recruit parents to bring their kids, to get their kids enrolled. It's, it's an issue. And so part of it is just helping parents connect their kids to the kind of resources that are available.
So people watching right now, do we tell them to go to the Department of Education? Do we tell them to go to their local Board of Education? What do we tell them to do?
They should go to their local Board of Education and learn about the programs that those school districts have to offer.
Is that the place to go?
It is, yes.
Go through your public?
Through your public, and also they can go to their local child care resource and referral agency if they're looking for child care.
And here's the other thing that's interesting, and not just for Carlos, where there are potentially language issues. How do you figure out? Say you want to figure out what the best early childhood education program is for your child. Say you are engaged, and you are involved, and you are motivated, and you want to say, this is the best program for our child. After you've looked at a few, how do you determine that?
Well, you'll look for, ideally you'd have a certified teacher in preschool education.
The backup assistant? Class size?
Class size matters. You'd look for a developmentally appropriate curriculum. So
what does that mean to the average person who doesn't understand that?
Okay, so it means that there's a scope and sequence of activities that are appropriate for young children.
We don't know what that. See, respectfully, you're using academic jargon that doesn't. Well, don't be sorry. It's just we don't know what that means.
Okay, so they're designed to match children's development, so where the child is, so a 3 and a 4-year-old, so they're designed to match that child's particular developmental level,
listen, I don't want to get into the weeds here. My only concern is parents don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's appropriate at that age.
So what they could look for an accredited center. So the National Association of Early Childhood Education has an accreditation that they could look for. They could look for, we support creative curriculum and high scope curriculum. So they could look for a center that uses that curriculum.
All keywords. By the way, go on our website. We'll make the links here.
Okay.
The Hispanic piece, that piece with the dual language issue, even more complicated, Carlos?
It is, and in the Hispanic community, talking about accreditation and how do you do it, it really becomes word of mouth.
What do you mean?
It's really, did the generation before, who does my uncle use?
Who does
a lot
my
of them
uncle
are not
use?
necessarily going to a website or going to the Board of Ed, fortunately or unfortunately. So it is something that really has to be out there, and because of today, I'm going to make sure the Chamber gets more involved in spreading some of that information to our members, because we do have a huge membership, and it is not a focus of the Chamber, early childhood education, but it has not been traditionally.
And you acknowledge that it's an area that's been missing.
Definitely. I do acknowledge that.
And you know, I would say, Steve, you're talking specifically about parents out there watching, but if there are people who are employees in corporations or leaders of corporations who are watching, there's a lot more that can be done from a volunteer perspective. So we allow our employees 40 volunteer hours, specifically in the Grow Upgrade space per year. Other corporations out there do the same thing. And so for us, that means going into these centers and reading to the children. It may mean going in and painting a preschool in an inner city. It may mean helping with the training of preschool teachers. But the point is that because many of these centers don't have unlimited resources, there's a great need from a volunteer standpoint. So I don't want to lose that in the conversation.
That's a huge point. The other piece that strikes me is that I watch children again, through the pre-K program that we know very well. And I watch the social and emotional interactions of these children, and I think to myself, there's some kids who really struggle, and I watch them at the beginning of the year, and again, I only see as a parent who comes in, and then you hear stories, and you try to watch, and I talk to our daughter, and I talk to the teachers, and you see the evolution of these children, and they really make great progress, and I think to myself, what would happen if they weren't in a quality early childhood program in terms of their social, emotional ability to interact and engage with other children? How important is that piece of it?
Well, it can be very helpful. Just as some kids can learn at home from their parents, so there's some kids who can grow up and have very high quality social skills, learn those from their siblings and from kids in the neighborhood. On the other hand, there are a broad set of skills that are sometimes called grit, resiliency, and so on, that involve developing, the skills to persist, to learn from experience, to respect each other's opinions, and those things can be learned in classrooms that are well structured along the lines that Ellen was talking about. And that's why if you have a class of 28 kids, it becomes difficult to do, because oftentimes young kids have difficulty regulating these interactions with each other, and they blow up and things get thrown, whatever. That's not what you want. What you want is for a teacher who can work with those kids and help structure the interaction in a way that each kid learns something from it. And we know what those, Ellen and the state have done a great job in trying to provide us with a sense of what high quality early childhood education looks like. But most people, if they visit a classroom, can tell, because the teachers are engaging with the kids. They're reading books that are not too high, that are using words that the kids understand, and that aren't talking down to the kids. So, a parent who's visiting a classroom,
you can feel it.
You can feel it,
or not.
You can feel it, and you can see that the teacher is focused on the kids and is adjusting his or her interactions so that to keep the kid engaged.
Am I making too much of that, Linda? Because I'm a big fan of, in the other work that I do, when I'm not on the air, I do a lot of executive coaching and leadership development in corporations. And I'll often say, when I see someone who has the inability to engage with other people, to negotiate and deal in a difficult situation, I'll often want to start asking questions about how they grew up. Meaning, I often, without getting into psychobabble, I often find that the inability that people have to negotiate effectively and interact with other people and get things done has an awful lot to do with how they grew up and what they learned or didn't learn. Am I making too much about those lessons?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we talked about this earlier. I think as children are young, they're very fertile. They're open to these lessons. Dan made a great point in terms of using the word resiliency. This is what our kids need to learn. I think that's a very, very important point. Absolutely.
And finally, looking ahead, Carlos, for children who happen to be learning English as a second language, if they don't learn English at this earlier stage, is it that much harder later?
Yeah, they're starting with a huge disadvantage. So they might be in third grade and be at a first grade level. So
say that again?
Gap, they might be in third grade, but their reading could be first grade or worse if they haven't had that foundation.
And a teacher could think that that child is just not very smart when that's not the case at all.
So it's not only the education, it's the perception. He's already growing up with a feeling of inferiority. So it's
a stigma.
It's a stigma. It's a disaster. So it's very important, more so, I would say, for the Hispanic community.
More so?
Yeah.
You've got 1 minute left.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can I just say,
real quick.
it's really important to support both home language and English. Because by the time, so if you have 2 years of preschool, by the time they get to kindergarten, they'll be bilingual, which is great. And if they're, they're bilingual and, I'm sorry.
No, they're bilingual. You're saying that it's important to be able to speak both languages.
That's a real benefit for both for children.
Right, absolutely. But at the same time, for a child whose language is not English, the ability to be able to speak English by the time they're 5 or 6 is critical.
Right.
That's just one of many issues. I want to thank all of you for joining us and making a huge contribution to this very important subject of early childhood education. Thank you very much.
The preceding program has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence, and 13 for WNET, NJTV, and WHYY. Funding for this edition of Caucus New Jersey has been provided by the PNC Foundation, which supports early childhood education through Grow Up Great, the New Jersey Education Association, Felician College, Virtua, MagnaCare, the Russell Berry Foundation, and by Steve and Elaine Pozicki. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area. Caucus New Jersey has been produced in partnership with TriStar Studios.
At Virtua, we don't cut the quad tendon for knee replacement, so you don't have to cut anything you love to do. It's what we don't cut that counts. The Virtua Joint Replacement Institute. Visit GotMyLifeBack.org today.